Hello and welcome back to He Knows. My name is Chris. I am your host, and I hope that everybody had the opportunity to have a wonderful Christmas and New Year's celebrations, or at the very least, have some wonderful time off with your families. Enjoy the time, enjoy the season, enjoy everything about being with each other that we're supposed to be able to enjoy in life. Unfortunately, the time keeps marching on, and we have our situations that keep cropping up. If you remember when we left off before the end of the year, I warned everybody, be careful because there's lots of bad things coming. Well, unfortunately, this has happened. We've had a few things pop up recently that on January 1st there was a truck incident in New Orleans where unimaginably the barriers for vehicle entrance were removed and quote unquote being restored. Now, why this was happening during the most active time of the year, in celebration time around New Year's, doesn't make one bit of sense to me. And interestingly enough, when the mayor of New Orleans was talking about a terrorist attack, which it probably was, you could see the police chief of New Orleans, who is a complete and total useless hack that had been fired from other major metropolitan cities before and just conveniently landed in New Orleans, didn't know what to do when she heard the word terrorist and started looking around confused. You can catch it on video out there. I know it's there. I've seen it. Now, this person that drove this electric Ford Lightning truck that had been rented from a company named Turo. I don't know much about Turo, but it sounds like one of those renting companies where you can rent somebody's vehicle. I do know that on the board of directors of the controlling company is a Clinton. Let that speak for itself. But this truck that was used was a rented vehicle loaded up and used to terrorize. First reports were 10 dead, 30 plus injured, and those numbers have changed over time as people have been clinging to life, trying to hang on and not pass on from this here world. But the problem is these things, it didn't just happen once, it happened a second time. The second time was with a Elon Musk Cybertruck, and this happened right in front of Trump's casino and hotel in Las Vegas. This Cybertruck was driven by, reportedly, a special forces military man that was apparently having some issues, so that the media says. Now, please keep in mind, you should believe nothing of what the media tells you and less of what the government tells you. And I think you're going to understand why it plays out that way. So it was reported that in Colorado, where this Cybertruck was rented, that this Special Forces military man purchased a .50 caliber Desert Eagle pistol along with a AR platform pistol. Now, an AR platform pistol, if it was an AR-15, shoots a projectile the size of a .22 inch slug. Now, this is a fairly powerful bullet because there's a lot of powder behind that casing, but it wasn't reported that he shot himself with the AR platform pistol. It was reported that he had shot himself with the .50 caliber Desert Eagle. Now, I want you to understand something about a .50 caliber Desert Eagle. First of all, the projectile that's going to come out of that muzzle is half an inch across, half an inch. Whereas with the 223, which is a .223 inches, also known as a 5.56 millimeter, or an AR platform, is a lot smaller projectile. So the AR projectile is literally half as big as the 50 caliber Desert Eagle projectile. Now, when supposedly this Special Forces military man shot himself with this 50 caliber Desert Eagle, it makes it almost impossible to believe that this is how it happened, because if you were to shoot yourself, if you were to take a 50 caliber Desert Eagle and shoot a watermelon, a melon, grapefruit, anything with that gun, there would be absolutely nothing left. And if you were to shoot yourself in the head with this projectile, and some are saying that he stuck the muzzle of the gun in his mouth in order to do this, it literally would have taken his entire head off. And in the video where we can see the flash, we can see this happen, none of that occurs. Another interesting twist in this story is Elon Musk has said that the Cybertruck is quote unquote bulletproof. And I have personally seen videos to where they've shown with a 9mm as opposed to a half an inch across projectile, 50 caliber. A 9mm is 0.33, I believe, or a 0.323, something very, very close to that. A 9mm, the Tesla Cybertruck can stop the 9mm projectile. It cannot stop the 50 caliber projectile. It goes like right through it like warm butter. So if this Special Forces military man was to have shot himself in the head with the Desert Eagle, first of all, he would not have had a head left. Second of all, the projectile would have continued through the truck. And in the video, we see no evidence of that at all. And it would have left a rather large hole. In the window, it would have shattered, or out of the top of the truck, whichever one, it would have made a big hole. So I don't believe that at all. Now, they claim that the bomb was consisting of camping fuel, which is essentially gasoline. It's like a triple refined gasoline, and you use it in your camping stoves, you use it in your Coleman lanterns, stuff like that. The reason why it is called white fuel is because it is filtered in nature and there is absolutely no contaminants in it. When you fill up your gas tank at the gas station, you're getting all kinds of contaminants, and that, of course, in burning is going to create some problems with flash and all kinds of things. You're not going to get a consistent burn, but with filtered fuel, you'll get a consistent fuel burn. Now, that fuel is somewhere on the order of about $15 or so a gallon. And then it was also said that there was also racing fuel as part of this improvised explosive device as well. Now, racing fuel is also expensive, somewhere on the order of $12 to $15 a gallon as well. It seems to me like somebody who was a Green Beret, Special Forces, with extensive experience in explosives would have made a better IED than what we saw go off there. Because really, the only thing that happened was it destroyed the inside of that truck. Thankfully, nobody else was harmed. So whoever is behind this, and I do not believe in any way at all that it is the Special Forces military man that they're claiming it is. I'm specifically not saying his name. I don't want to tarnish his name until we know more. In other news, as I'm sure everyone has heard of the January 6th insurrection, there was another event that happened that day that is much, much less publicized, although it has gotten quite a bit of attention in the Senate, and that is the pipe bomb that was left outside the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. Now, the interesting thing is that Vice President-elect at the time, Kamala Harris, was in the building when this device was found. Now, somebody had found the device, went over and talked to the Secret Service. Now, the Secret Service was there because Kamala Harris was in the building. And they were like, oh, yeah, okay. And they really didn't do anything about it. Eventually, what took place is that the FBI has now claimed that they tried to get all of the information from the cell phones that the Secret Service had, that everybody had, that was on site that day, and they claimed it was corrupted. Now, the telecom provider has come back and said, there's nothing wrong with that information. We've double checked it ourselves and everything is intact. So here, yet again, we have the FBI, Christopher Wray's FBI, lying to us about the events of the day. Nobody seems to understand exactly why Kamala Harris was at the DNC building as opposed to being at the Capitol, where she at the time was an elected senator and was needed to be there to certify the election. It seems to me that they were going to do anything in their power that they could to stop the election from being decertified, because they had already had a couple of congressmen and senators say that they would not certify the election. And this was done because there are numerous problems with the vote throughout the 2020 election. This has come to bear witness throughout the last 4 years. There's no question about it. The vote was tainted in many, many, many states, if not all of them. Even someplace like Oklahoma, which every county in the state was red, there probably was still some kind of voter inconsistencies if you go and look at it. So what was really going on? Well, as the events at the Capitol started heating up and they were able to feed on this quote-unquote insurrection, I believe that they decided that the pipe bomb at the DNC headquarters building wasn't needed, so they tried to make it quietly disappear. They didn't want to have to explain two separate issues, so they tried to wash this one under the rug and then let the quote-unquote insurrection led by President Trump, who said patriotically and civilly and all that, go and protest and let your voices be heard. He never said anything about tearing things down, like we know that people like Black Lives Matter in Seattle and Minnesota did. St. Paul, I believe it was. So that pretty much sums up the events that I wanted to bring up on current events, except for one thing. Our big topic tonight is going to be Panama. And recently, President Trump has announced that if they can't provide safe and equitable passage, well, then we'll just take it back. Now, we're not necessarily taking it back from Panama because, personally, I do not believe Panama is in control of the Panama Canal. And over the course of the next several minutes, we're going to explain why. First, we're going to explain why the Panama Canal is so important. The Panama Canal, before the Panama Canal, in order to get goods shipped from, say, the east coast of the Americas to the west coast of the Americas, for example, say, and this was very important in the day, back when the gold rush hit California, they needed to be able to get that gold from the west coast to the east coast in short order in order to, well, because all of the economic centers were on the east coast. So what would happen is they would try sending some across the terrain, which proved to be very problematic. Going across the Rockies, going across the Mississippi River, all of these things proved to be, and gold, of course, is incredibly heavy. If you've got vast amounts of gold, there is a lot of weight to it. So what they would have to do is they would have to load this gold on ships. And in order to get it from the west coast of California to the east coast, whether it be Florida or even New York City, they would have to travel and do transoceanic shipping all the way down past the very southern point of South America, all the way back up the coast and to their destination. Now, this is a trek of something like 8,000 miles and can literally take three to 4+ weeks in order to get accomplished, depending on the size of the ship, depending on how fast they could go. It was literally weeks of travel. Not only that, but down on the southern tip of South America, the oceans can be incredibly rough. So that transoceanic travel proved to be very hostile, very dangerous, and a lot was lost. A lot. So they decided that it might be a good idea to try and build a canal between in the smallest section of the Americas, which happened to be in Panama. Now, the first time they tried to do this was they began in 1880, and this was an attempt by the French. The French tried to create a sea-level canal, much like they had done with the Suez Canal, which is still in operation today. The problem is that in 1889, the French pulled up the white flag of surrender, as they are well known for doing, and gave up and abandoned their efforts in order to build the canal. Well, in 1901, there was the Hay-Ponce-Forte Treaty, and this was allowed the United States to build its own canal. In 1902, the Senate approves building the canal through Panama. Isn't it nice that the Senate or any Congress actually did something for the benefit of America rather than just taking money from us? And it was a huge benefit, and we'll get to that momentarily. So in 1904, construction began on the Panama Canal, and over the course of the next 10 years, between 1904 and 1914, the canal was constructed. And the way they did it was they created locks. And these locks, what they do is they build basically concrete structures that they allow ships to pull into, and then they raise the water level to match the water level of the next area they need to go to, because Panama is rather hilly and was problematic to just dig through all that in order to create a canal. So they did it in the form of locks to where they could move through. And in the course of 8 to 10 hours, a ship traveling from east to west, west to east, was able to traverse the Panama Canal and get to the other side and able to get to their destination. And again, this saved literal weeks of travel, saving on fuel, saving on lives because of the dangers involved in the transoceanic travel down past the southern point of South America. So, unfortunately, in 1999, the United States transferred oversight of the canal back to Panama. Now, this is something that was started back in 1979 by then President Jimmy Carter, who has recently graduated from the second worst president in modern American history to now the third worst president in modern American history. And I understand that President Carter has just passed away. And I also understand that it's a sad time when any president passes away and we lose part of our history. But again, this is a president that literally did nothing to help America. And in the case of the Panama Canal, even though it's praised by the criminal media, it's one of the worst things that he could have done. From 1977 all the way, they had 20 years to get this transition in place. So from 1977 to 1997, this was done. And then finally, on December 31st of 1999, they transitioned power completely over and oversight completely over to the Panamanians. Now comes the CCP. In 1997, when the treaty was enacted, the CCP started moving in. And they did this by, before we get to that, let's talk about the other treaty that was also signed in 1977. This was called the Permanent Neutrality Treaty. Now, along with this, what they referred to as the Torrijos-Carter Treaty that turned oversight of the canal over to the Panamanians, this Permanent Neutrality Treaty, which was also signed in 1977, this treaty stipulates that the United States may use military force to protect the Panama Canal from any threat to its neutrality. Now, any threat to its neutrality seems pretty basic to me and pretty blunt. There's no wiggle room. And this is where things start to get interesting. Lately, President Trump, as just a few days ago, President Trump tweeted on Truth that if Panama could not guarantee secure, efficient, and reliable operation, that the U.S. would take back the Panama Canal. Now, it seems to me that this permanent neutrality treaty allows for that. But herein lies the problem, right? Panamanian President Jose Raul Mulino, in his best yapping collared puppy voice, stated that the canal is not controlled by China, Europe, the U.S., or any other country. Now, while that may technically be true, that the canal itself, access to the canal is a completely different story. And we know this. We have a response from Trump. And we know that by this yapping puppy that he's probably worried about his gold-filled pockets. And we've talked about BGY. And in this case, it's his gold-filled pockets. He's afraid that they'll soon be empty. Now, Trump's response to this yapping puppy is, we'll see about that, which I thought was fantastic. So Marco Rubio, who is Trump's nominee for Secretary of State and longtime senator from Florida, went down to Panama, and he came back very, very concerned about the influence of the CCP over the canal. In a 2022 X post by Rubio, he stated that the canal is an important transit route to intercept illicit activities, yet the canal is surrounded by CCP enterprises. We must continue to make clear that Panama is an important partner and warn against CCP attempts to establish a foothold in our region. That seems pretty clear to me. Now, we're going to take a moment now, and we're going to watch Miles just have a discussion about, make a few comments, let me say. He's going to make a few comments about the Panama Canal, and I think this will bring forth a little bit more light that we're going to talk about in just a moment. Go ahead and play that video.
这就是为什么我和很多美国朋友说， 他们说司法部先查出来间谍，这是蓝金黄3F，哎呀，现在越来越看到是事实。我说我现在告诉你，美国朋友们，你们真的是你连个毛都没摸着，关于中共在你这块布下的局。你说就张守胜的事件、华为事件，他能在这个两国之间关系能算啥呀？能算有比例吗？通缉你几个军人间谍，哪国没有啊？他没干而已。真正的大老虎在哪呢？在美国内部呢。那南海布置那武器，他那么简单吗？他脑子一拍脑袋说，把红旗这个导弹系统放那儿去，把东风导弹放那儿去，东风31A 放那儿去，东风31打哪儿啊？拿它去打哪儿去啊？1万多英里啊，1万多公里啊，那是突破第二岛链的事儿吗？哪那么简单呢？阿根廷搞的呢，那是干啥的呀？吉布提那干啥的呀？巴拿马那大使馆那下面是啥玩意儿？搞几层楼？那底下干啥的呀？那么多船，几百万吨的船运输，那下面是啥呀？那退伍的很多军人，没用的军人让回家了，认为你年龄没用了，没有榨取价值了。很多年轻的军人都去哪儿了？所以，有意思。中美关系是啥关系？
Now, Miles brings up some very interesting points at the beginning of that video clip. Number one, he talks about BGY, and we understand that the political powers that be down in Panama certainly have experienced the G in that BGY. They are filling their pockets with gold. But he also mentions the 3F plan. Now, we're not going to go deeply into the 3F plan tonight. I'm going to save that for next week probably. But just to give you a little bit of a tease, the 3F plan is a plan, as described by Miles, to take down the United States of America. And those 3Fs are foment weakness, foment chaos, foment the destruction of the United States. And we will be going over that pretty heavily in the next episode. But I wanted to get back to what's going on here with Panama. So it's interesting to me that we're starting to talk about all these things where the Chinese, the CCP, are getting involved in countries outside of what would appear to be their realm over in Asia. The CCP is actually in control of ports on both sides, the Atlantic side and the Pacific side of the Panama Canal. Then this all started in 1997, right when the treaty was beginning to kick off, but before the Americans had completely given over control to the Panamanians. Now, the CCP has its port of control in the Crystal Ball port on the Atlantic side, and on the Pacific side is the Balboa port. Both of these ports are operated by Hutchison Whampoa, and since a 2015 merger has now been known as CK Hutchison Holdings. They're headquartered in Hong Kong, which of course the CCP took over a few years ago, and of course these companies that the CCP controls, what are you going to do? Now, CK Hutchison Holdings has interests in ports in 24 separate countries, a total of about 53 ports. They're in energy, transportation, and water infrastructure projects, as well as telecom. All of the things, all of the regular targets that totalitarian dictators love to be able to control the world. This is exactly the areas of where they can try to control countries. Now, this interesting here is that Panama severed ties with Taiwan back in 2017 because they wanted to clearly make a statement. Now, Panama, which is a South American Latin country, really that should be paying attention to its own self, winds up severing ties with Taiwan. It doesn't make any sense except that they're the lapdog of the CCP. That's the only way it makes any sense. You got to do what the big dog tells you when you're the yapping puppy. Am I right? So, also in 2017, Panama became the first Latin American country to join the CCP's Belt and Road Initiative. And as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese state-owned companies were awarded a $1.42 billion deal in order to build a fourth bridge over the canal. Not only that, Xi Jinping got into the mess and took a trip to Panama where they signed deals for trade, infrastructure, banking, education. Education? How in the world would the CCP have anything to do with Latin American education? It doesn't make any sense at all. Are they trying to do DEI in Latin America that's all CCP related? Maybe. And then the other thing is tourism. And a lot of new tourism ports are now down in the Panama Canal area, completely and totally controlled by the CCP. You saw Miles there talking about young military men going from China over to Panama. Why would that be? Yet these morons that are in power in Panama are claiming that there is no CCP intervention in the Panama Canal. I think you can see that they're absolutely lying to you. Well, folks, it's been good to get back together with you. And like I said, next week we're going to talk probably a little bit more about this Panama Canal. We're going to do a little bit more research, dig in a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about that 3F program that the CCP is pushing and show maybe a little bit how it's actually working here in America. I thank you so much for sharing your time with me, and I look forward to having you next week. Thank you for being here.